Hello everyone, I am Devisri, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychology, Theivanai Ammal College for Women's Autonomous. Today I am presenting on a significant concept in the field of stress research, the General Adaptation Syndrome, also known as Hans-Selye's model. Developed by Dr. Hans-Selye, this model explains how the human body responds to stress. Let's now explore this important framework and understand how it helps us to study the stress and its major impact on health. This presentation will cover the basic understanding of stress, its definition, adaptive and maladaptive behavior, Hans-Selye's general adaptation model, the stages of stress and evaluation and critiques of the model, and finally the stress management technique. Let's begin with the introduction to stress. The 20th century has been called as the age of anxiety and stress. There is an alarming increase in health problems related to tension and anxiety. Some 75% of diseases are stress related diseases. For example, hypertension, heart disease and gastric ulcers and migraines. The word stress was originally used by Selye in 1956 to describe the pressure experienced by a person in response to life demands. These demands are referred to as stressors. The stress can be a positive or negative. The stress is the body's automatic response to any physical or mental demand placed on it. The stress is the human reaction to event in our environment. The physical and environment and social causes are often said to be stressors. Okay. So next, the definition of stress. Stress is a negative emotional experience accompanied by a predictable biochemical, physiological, cognitive and behavioral changes that are directed by either towards altering the stressful event or accommodating to its effect. The stress is an internal state which can be caused by physical demands on the body or by environment and social situations which are evaluated as a potentially harmful, uncontrollable or exceeding our resources for coping. The stress is any kind of pressure that affects a person's human daily life. This effect may be healthy or unhealthy depending on his or her reaction to stress factors. Okay, so next, adaptation and maladaptation. Adaptation refers to the process by which an individual modifies their behavior, thought, emotion to effectively respond to internal and external stressors or changes in the environment. This adjustment helps in maintaining a psychological and physiological balances. When a person in a threatening situation, immediate response will be occurred. Those responses are often involuntary or called coping responses or mechanism. The changes takes place as a result of response to a stress source is adaptation. So adaptive behavior. So adaptive behavior is a behavior that enables a person to get along in their environment with greater success and least conflict with others. So adaptive behavior involves a constructive and healthy response to stress. And maladaptive behavior are those that stop you from the adapting to a new or difficult circumstance. So the maladaptive behavior are unhealthy and ineffective way of coping with stress. So, for example, seeking social support and practicing relaxation technique, problem solving, maintaining a positive outlook. These are the examples for the adaptive behavior. And for maladaptive behavior, examples are the substance abuse, social withdrawal, aggression, avoidance and denial. Okay. So, sometimes the scientific breakthroughs happens by an accident. So that was the case for Hungarian-born endocrinologist Hans-Selye 1907 to 1982, who first introduced the concept of general adaptation syndrome. So it is also known as a GAS in 1936, who views the stress as the universal response to human organism to various stimulants called by an stressor. can say Hans Selye defines the stress as a shocks to the body. He discovered that each organism reacts in the same way and the body effort has a specific purpose of adaptation and a survival, and hence called this aggregation as a reaction to common adaptation syndrome. Okay, so according to Selye's classification, the positive is refers to as a stress and negative is refers to as a distress. Okay, so what is general adaptation syndrome? So Selye described a general adaptation syndrome as a body's universal response to stress, no matter what form of stress takes, from a physical injury to emotional pressure. It consists of the three stages. The first one is the alarm stage, and second one is resistance stage, and third one is exhaustion stage. Okay, the first, alarm stage. So the body prepares the flight or flee. Resistance, the body adapt to and tries to cope. Exhaustion, if stress continues, the body resources get depleted. Okay. Interestingly, the Selye stumbled upon this concept while trying to discover a new hormone. He was injecting a rat with the ovarian extract and noticed the pattern of changes. He found that enlarged adrenal gland and stinking of immune organs and stomach ulcer. But these changes are happened not just with the ovarian extract. Every injected substance, even a toxic formalin, caused the same effect. So this led the Selye to a deeper realization. It wasn't a new hormone, but it was a universal stress response. Okay. So different stages of general adaptation syndrome. So the general adaptation syndrome consists of three phases. The first phase is the alarm phase, in which a body reacts to a stressor with a diminished resistance. In the second stage, the stage of resistance that follows a continuous exposure to a stressor, the stress response rises above the normal. The third phase, the exhaustion stage, the results from a long-term exposure to a stressor. At the point, the resistance will below normal. Next, in evaluation of the general adaptation syndrome, the alarm reaction stages. The first one, alarm stage. The alarm reaction stage of general adaptation syndrome is the body's initial response to the stress. So this is the first stage of general adaptation syndrome. During this stage, your body sends a distress signal to your brain. So your body responds by sending a message to the body, releasing a human hormones called glucocorticoid and adrenaline. These are also known as a flight or fight response. So during this stage, the alarm reaction stage is also experienced by the elevated blood pressure and heart rate, and pupils are dilated and sense become heightened and hot flushes. Okay. The sympathetic nervous system is also activated by the sudden release of hormones. You may better know the stage as a flight or fight response. So the systematic nervous system is a part of the autonomic nervous system which regulates the function of your body, the stomach, bladder and intestine, as well as your muscle functions. You are not aware of this system is also working because it is automatically respond to a stimuli. When the sympathetic nervous system is activated, it stimulated the adrenaline gland. The adrenal gland in turn triggered the release of certain hormones, including the adrenaline and noradrenaline and cortisol. Okay. The physical signs of being in alarm stage of general adaptation syndrome included the dilated of pupils, increased heart rate, rapid breathing and trembling, and pale and flushed skin and heightened sense of. So according to Selye, the most of the symptoms of the alarm response stages disappear or reversed in the next stage, called resistance stage, then reappear in the final stage of exhaustion stage. Okay. So the second stage. So the resistant stage of general adaptation syndrome is when your body tries to repair itself after the initial shock of stress. If the stressful situation is no longer present and you can overcome the stress, your heart rate and blood pressure will start to return to the pre-stress level during this stage. However, if the stress level situation continues for a longer time, or if you do not resolve the stress, your body will never receive a signal to return to a normal functioning level. Okay, this means it will never continue to secrete the stress hormone, and your blood pressure will stay high. Prolonged level of high stress can cause a disturbance in immune and digestive system, cardiovascular and sleep and reproductive system. You might have the symptoms such as a feeling of fear, anger, sadness and worry, numbness or any frustration you will feel. And irritability, change in appetite, in energies and desires and interest, and stomach problems and headaches and any body and skin rashes. So sleeplessness and nightmares, and these are all the symptoms of the reaction stage when you are prolonged exposure to a stress. Okay, and then the exhaustion stage. So the prolonged or chronic stress lead to a last stage of general adaptation syndrome called exhaustion. So enduring the stressors without relief drain your physical, emotional and mental resources to the point where your body is no longer able to cope up with the stress. This is the riskiest stage of general adaptation syndrome, as you are most prone to the developing health condition here. The signs that you are in the exhaustion stage include fatigue and burnout and decreased stress tolerance level. Okay, and the complications of general adaptation syndrome. So the general adaptation syndrome is not a medical condition that you can be diagnosed with. Rather, it is the process your body goes through automatically when it experiences the stress. The physical effect of prolonged stress can weaken your immune system and increase your stress of the heart disease and high blood pressure and diabetes and other chronic health conditions, including the mental health disorders such as depression and anxiety and other relatable disorders. So some of the most common conditions that have been linked to the experiencing the prolonged level of stress of either the physical or mental stress included hypertension, mood and anxiety disorder, heart disease, immune suppression, headache and insomnia, then memory problem, obesity, pain, diabetes 2 and substance use disorder and other mental conditions. It can be caused due to the prolonged exposure to the any kind of stressors. Okay. Then the critique of general adaptation syndrome. Okay, Selye's general adaptation syndrome, while this model was groundbreaking, it is not without any limitations. So acknowledging the contribution, Selye was the first to systematically define the study stress. His work laid a foundation for understanding how the body reacts to the stressors. He identified as 3 stages. First one is alarm stage, and second one is resistance stage, and third one is exhaustion stage, explaining bodily reactions to the prolonged stress. So this model was simple, clear and universally understandable. It focused on the body's hormonal response and nervous system activation during the stressful event. In short, it helped to science take stress seriously as a medical and psychological issues. And when it comes to discuss about the criticism of the general adaptation syndromes of Selye's model has been criticized on several grounds. Okay. However, and stress research advanced and several criticism of the GAS model emerged. Firstly, it ignores the role of psychological and emotional factors. Selye's model doesn't account for how our thoughts, emotion and coping strategies or personality traits influences our stress response. This makes the model somewhat mechanical and limited. So secondly, the model assumes a universal reaction to stress, but in reality, people respond differently to the same stress based on the background, experience and resilience, and stress is not a one size fit to all stressors. Okay. So then thirdly, the Selye's model doesn't consider how an individual perceive or evaluate the stressors. Unlike Lazarus and Folkman's cognitive appraisal theory, which emphasizes how a person interprets a situation, the gas model focuses only on the body's automatic response, overlooking the mind's rule. And these are the critics of the general adaptation syndrome and the stress management technique. Now let us look at some effective stress management technique that can help to mitigate the effect of stress and support recovery during the stages of general adaptation syndrome. One of the most powerful and simple technique is deep breathing. Okay. So this involves a slow controlled breath that engage a diaphragm, helping the body calm down and lower our stress level and hormones. Next is the progressive muscle relaxation technique. So which includes the tensing and relaxing the different muscle group one at a time. This method is effective in releasing physical tension held in the body. So guided imaginary technique is another useful strategy. It involves mentally visualizing the peaceful and calming scenes like a beach or a forest to reduce the stress and anxiety. And then a mindfulness technique is one of the techniques that train the mind to focus on the present moment rather than dwelling on the past regrets or the future worries. It helps to enhance the self-awareness and emotional control. And last but not the least, the physical activities such as the yoga, body stretches and light exercises is highly beneficial. These movements not only improve the physical health but also release the endorphin that naturally reduce the stressors. Together these techniques can greatly support the stress recovery and also improve the overall well-being. Okay. And conclusion. In conclusion, the general adaptation syndrome describes the process your body go through when you are exposed to any kind of stress, whether it is a positive or negative. If you do not resolve the stress that has triggered the general adaptation syndrome, it can lead to physical and mental health problems. So, by understanding which stressors affect you and learning the strategies to cope up with this stress can help you to avoid the consequence of chronic stressful conditions. If you are having a hard time coping with the stress, reach out to a healthcare providers or a mental health professionals for support. So this is the end of the presentation. Thank you.